Hey you guys, it's me, Alice, and I've got more patch notes for you. And these ones make me really happy. Let's go check it out. Okay, patch notes for July 20th. What's new? This week brings bug fixes, more variety in loot tables, and AoE improvements. A good chunk of my time this week was spent configuring new servers. Configuring the new router, analyzing player leveling rates, and tweaking experience curves. Sand continues work on quests and tells me that we are close to internal testing, which means player testing is just around the corner. And Adric has been populating spawn templates for dungeon rooms, which will make bringing new dungeons online far quicker than we were able to do in the past. Bug fixes and improvements. Tech. Fixed ground torches that are reused. When one is put out while another is nearby, it no longer starts off sunken in the ground. Camera now detects water more consistently. This should resolve issues with the camera going nuts in Meadowlands. Fix players getting stuck in rocks in Meadowlands. Heal threat now considers distance from the original source. This should help in situations where HOTS on pullers was causing threat to accumulate on faraway supporters. Environmental and art. Fixed the grass groupings showing a pattern. Fixed issues with redwood trees bending. Dungeon skylights now change colors depending on the time of day outside the dungeon. This varies the ambient mood in the dungeon and gives you a better sense of time progression. UI. Status effect tooltips now show the correct channel and value. Fixed double negative signs on the stat panel. Design. Target dummies in South and North New Haven now have armored and non-armored variants. Additional resources can be harvested from resource nodes in group-focused areas of the world. If anyone has any suggestions for what we might call these dense versions of logs, mushrooms, plants, and gems, let us know. Currently, ore uses the dense prefix, but it is also open for suggestion. Returned all weapons and armor to NPC loot tables. The previous split between crafting and dropped gear made for some awkward abundance of certain items. I'm looking at you, Copperhelm. Crafting professions, however, are still restricted in what they can make until specializations are added. Updated which weapons drop from what type of creatures. With all weapons returning to loot tables, this needed to be refactored to make room for additional weapon types. Dropped cloth armor variety is drastically increased. Multiple styles and colors of dropped shirts, pants, and gloves have been added to loot tables. This should help avoid those awkward moments where everyone in the party shows up wearing the same shirt. Fixed robust leather recipe incorrectly being named dense leather. Increased effectiveness of duelist weak point ability. The ability now has an increased reduction to physical resist to counter mob resist more effectively. Increased effectiveness of AoE abilities like sweep, arc, wild strikes, and collateral damage. These abilities will deal more damage, have lower cooldowns, and hit more targets, and use less stamina than they did previously. How much you want to bet it's going to get nerfed? So everyone's going to be playing a Juggernaut and a Berserker now. It has come to my attention that we may not be transparent enough in what we are working on. I do not want our community to feel as though their feedback is not important or undervalued. Our team is small, which means that we are constantly juggling what we are working on, and sometimes things get pushed to the back of the line. That does not necessarily mean that those things are forgotten. We have just moved on to something else for the time being. I'm going to add my own 2 cents here. Sometimes things do slip through the cracks. and do get forgotten. But that's why it's important to bring things up again if you've brought it up in your feedback or something previously, and you know, it's been a while. Bring it back up again. Hey, this is still an issue. What's the status on this, or you know, what's the progress? You know, bring it up again somehow. You know, they are a small team and they have a lot on their plate. So sometimes we just have to remind them of some crumbs that fell off. But again, the point I'm making here is that your feedback is important and not to stop giving it. Anyways, continuing on. In hopes of being more transparent, I am breaking out of the typical work in progress section to a new thread of work in progress items that will act as a rough roadmap for the game. This list of items is organized by category and is in no specific order of status or priority. I will do my best to update this list on a weekly basis and highlight the differences from the previous week with bold font. Below, I will highlight some of the upcoming changes with more details. New servers, timeline 1 week. While shopping for a new server, we realized that most of the new and used options didn't quite offer the horsepower we required within our budget. To that end, we built our own custom rack-mounted solution. In fact, we built two. One will be heading into the data center, while the other serves as a backup and testing ground. Getting these going took a bit more time than I was expecting due to unexpected issues, like cables being too short. I also encountered my first bad CPU in 20 plus years of building computers, which was quite interesting. The current plan is to bring the game servers down on Monday at noon, so that I can install and configure the new one. Ideally, this process doesn't hit any snags, but I want to make sure that Monday afternoon and Tuesday are clear just in case. This will include mounting the new machine, installing the new router and switch, and making sure that everything can communicate with one another. Excuse the cable mess, this was early in the build process. Spawn controller improvements, timeline 1 to 2 weeks. There are two primary improvements that I'm looking to make in our spawning system in the near future. The first of which is adding an additional option for selecting what spawns. Currently, each spawn is selected via a random draw from a list of items with fixed probabilities. However, this can lead to some bad RNG, since each draw uses the same set of probabilities. In other words, if a rare spawn has a 5% chance of popping, then every time the spawn controller goes to select a spawn, it has a 5% chance of selecting that rare. This new method will instead construct a fixed size list containing a number of each item based on their desired probability. As an example, we might create a list of 100 items to draw from, and 5 of those items would be the rare spawn. Now, every time the controller draws, it will remove an item from the list, increasing the probability that the remaining items will be selected on the next draw. This methodology will likely be extended to loot drops shortly afterwards. The second improvement is adding tech to support Ashen variants. Without spoiling too much of the fun, I can say that some additional tech is required in order to bring Ashen creatures online in the way that we want. These creatures will be your primary way of collecting Ember Essence, and so how we will bring them into the world is a bit different. Experience re-evaluation, timeline 2 to 3 weeks. Over the past week, I have been analyzing the rate at which you all have been leveling since the last wipe. The general consensus is that the pace from leveling 1 to 10 is just where we want it. After that, however, things seem to be going a bit too quickly. By extrapolating your average leveling pace, we calculated how much playing time would be required to hit max level. Our findings miss our target by a large margin. I then started looking into different mathematical representations of a leveling curve that might give us a bit more control over the pacing. The current curve is a relatively simple exponential. Modifying the parameters, however, impacts the entire curve and would make the endgame nearly impossible. Switching over to a logarithmic curve gives us a bit more flexibility in where the rise and difficulty happens, but makes the later levels all roughly the same. Finally, we come around to the trusty quadratic equation. This gives us a good amount of control, but requires a good amount of fine-tuning of parameters. We are still working our way through the finer details of what this curve looks like, but our goal is to make the levels 1 to 10 feel as they do now, and then past that, slow things down while making each subsequent level slightly more difficult than the last. So I gotta say, this leveling thing, while I think it's great and I think that we need it, I hope that we do not get it until after we get quests, because we will be bored and frustrated out of our minds. I'm just saying. With the leveling being that much slower, I hope we don't get it until after we get questing, because that will give us something to do. Anyways, I'm not going to go on a tangent about quests. We'll save that for Discord or stream or something. I knew that we were like getting new servers sometime in the near future, but I had no idea that like we were getting them like now. I knew it was like a thing that was being looked at, but yeah, wow, awesome. Good work. Hopefully it helps with performance. We gave the target dummies armor. Yay. Thank you. I'm glad things were added back to the loot tables, because it was another thing that took away our in-game revenue, because gear is one of the main things that we sell that's worth a decent amount of silver. And I still feel that we keep losing sources of revenue and gaining things to buy. And that's just not good. Doesn't feel good. So I'm glad for that. Not only does it make my life easier trying to gear up a low-level character that's 15 levels behind everyone else because I was on vacation, but I can also catch up on my bank space as well, because I'm very behind everybody else. And when that happens with such a small player base, it becomes increasingly difficult to find people to play with. And if there aren't people to play with, I don't want to play. This patch note makes me quite happy. Thank you all for watching, and I really hope to see you in game. Come join me in Discord.